Today I have with me two very special voices, Vijay and Asha. Vijay and Asha are both people who will be sharing their lived experiences, their insights, their learnings with us. Uh, you know, uh, Okay, first me. I am Sonica. I am the CEO and founder of MarchingSheep. And this is the first podcast that we are doing for the month of December. And this is on a topic of mental disabilities. And I remember when we were talking about this, and there were people we were talking about, there was ideation happening, and a lot of us kept on switching between neurodiversity, neurodivergence, mental disabilities, mental health challenges, mental health issues. And we said that, listen, we are in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. And we are the ones who are struggling with the nuances of the right words, with the right terminology. And then there are people who are dealing with the conditions. There are people who are looking for employment. Or there are people who are possibly waiting to employ people. And is there clarity around it? So we said, okay, this December, let's start with this topic, and so here we are. Allow me to please, introduce Asha and Vijay to all of you. Asha has served as the CFO for Shell gas and retail businesses in India, and now contributes in a global planning role for IT investments. Alongside her corporate journey, she has co founded Vision Sync, a platform that supports women at the workplace through leadership pathways, employee resource groups, and coaching. And there's something which is written about her work. It says that bringing structure and heart together in how organizations work. And this kind of resonates with me because when we work at Marching Sheep, we keep saying in letter and spirit, in letter and spirit. Let's do everything with the right intention. So, welcome on board, Asha. Thank you so much for taking out time for this.
Thank you for having me.
Um, and then we have Vijay. It was such a chance meeting Vijay with you, and uh, we just got in touch over LinkedIn. And from there, we said, okay, let's connect over a call. And then we started talking and we found common ground, common interest. And here we are. So let me tell you about Vijay. Vijay Nallawala is an author. He's founder of Bipolar India. He's co founder and managing trustee of the Mental Health Support Foundation. His livelihoods initiative, Let's Walk Together, has helped many move towards dignity and independence. With 3 decades of entrepreneurship behind him, he brings a rare blend of lived experience and practical insight. So, Vijay and Asha, really looking forward to this conversation. So, shall we begin?
Thank you for having me, firstly. Yeah, and for the wonderful introduction.
All right. So, my first question, like I said, that there is limited awareness around mental disabilities, mental health, the fine difference or the nuances between neurodiversity and mental disabilities. What exactly is covered under the RPWD Act 2016? So, why don't we start with the basics? And over to you, Asha, and then Vijay will come to you. Please.
As far as the legal act is concerned, I think Vijay is the right person. So maybe you want to go first, Vijay, because I come from my personal experience and what we encourage corporates to do. But the nuance of the legal, I think, Vijay, you're best placed.
Thank you so much. So, Sonika, the RPDA, talks about mainly severe disabilities, which are then supported through different sort of accommodations.
Hmm.
That can be quotas in the government sector and in POSUs, okay, the job quotas, yeah, and also there's accommodation in the higher education sector. Now, but for a person with a serious mental health condition to be eligible for these accommodations provided by the Act, one has to go through a gamut of tests, assessments, under the IDEA scale as it is known, IDEAS.
Yes.
Yeah, and one has to meet the benchmark 40% disability to be eligible for the UDID card, and then from therefrom to be eligible for these accommodations. Yeah. And typically, the mental disorders that are covered under the RPDA are conditions such as paranoid schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, severe OCD, and more than the diagnosis itself, it is the impairment in functionality which is, sort of gauged by the assessing team. Yeah. And the other part of your question, uh, I mean, both being invisible disabilities, when we talk about neurodivergence and mental health led disabilities. So what comes under the gamut of neurodivergence would be conditions such as ASD, that is autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, dyslexia, and so on and so forth. So these are several of these are also covered under the RPDA. Okay, such disabilities such as autism, intellectual disabilities are indeed covered under the RPDA. And what separates disabilities are, so they are not typically neurological conditions, but they are said to be a sort of a construct which we call uh, biopsychosocial, right? A bit of
Yes.
biology, bit of the psychological aspect of what a mental health condition does to the person, and social meaning the environment. I think
Yeah.
that would give you a fair indication of what we are talking about,
Yeah.
right?
So, Vijay, I'll come back to you because this is very
Yeah,
interesting. I think you've
yeah,
given a very, I mean, listing out, for example, OCD, schizophrenia,
yeah,
bipolar,
yeah.
um, and differentiating with neurodiversity. Um, but what also comes to my mind, and here, let me ask you, Asha, because while there is something which the Act says, how does this knowledge translate at the workplace in terms of how they are treated and accommodated?
So, what's very interesting is I think the knowledge in the workplace is fairly limited even today. What is great is, there's a lot of conversation around mental well-being, mental health in corporates. But whether severe mental illnesses is being dealt with, the fact of the matter is it's really not. Having said that, 1 in 7 people are apparently diagnosed with severe mental illnesses, and that is if you translate that to the workplace, it's a significant enough number for corporates to have to pay attention to, right? Because it's going to be impacting productivity and so on.
Hmm.
What's interesting is the employment landscape in the country is also changing drastically. So you have these global capability centers coming up, and there are about 1950 global capability centers employing about 1.9 million people in the country, and it's meant to go up to about 2,500 in by 2030 thereabouts. These organizations are the best place to start sort of talking about severe mental illnesses. Having said that, the accommodations that we are asking for is not very different for people with severe mental illnesses. So, severe mental illnesses, people can be high functioning as long as they're medicated and there's therapy, etc. And it's episodic in nature. So if you think about bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, and even for psychotic episodes, even for me, I'm a bipolar patient myself, and I've had psychotic episodes. My episodes have lasted for less than a week. So
Mm.
that's when you need the most amount of accommodations, and it doesn't vary much, right? You need leave, you need flexible working. And then if there's any emergency, you need to be able to move around your meetings and so on and so forth. But at the same time, awareness is super important because ultimately line managers are probably the facing the wrath of all of it, right? Or the impact of somebody's mental illnesses, and they can't be expected to be therapists or coaches, and therefore the awareness needs to be upped quite drastically. And this is a great starting point, I would say.
No, thank you so much, Vijay and Asha, for that input. And you also brought up line managers. But before I come to line managers, I just want to know that yes, it's invisible. Awareness is less. The accommodations when it comes to neurodiversity and mental disabilities is fairly similar in nature. Having said that, when does a person get to know? Is it that I am born with a mental disability? Because, for example, clinical depression can happen at any time. I can get symptoms of anxiety at a later stage in time in life. My bipolar disorder, my first episode might happen later in life, if I'm right. So it's not like people would know from childhood onwards that this is what I have. This is the condition that I have, which is the same for neurodivergent individuals as well. Uh, Asha, Vijay.
Yeah, so I can talk about myself. My father has been diagnosed bipolar as well. He had a major episode of depression where he couldn't go to work for about 3 months, and that's when we knew something was off. And he came out of it, and then he went into mania. And thankfully, we had great doctors. So that was at the age of 40. For myself, again, I was diagnosed at 36. Again, it was not depression; it was a psychotic break, a psychosis that led to the diagnosis that I do have bipolar disorder. And it wasn't that scary because I saw it with my father, and he'd lived a great quality of life until his dying day. The medication he used is a medication I used, etc. For my daughter, she was diagnosed at the tender age of 12. And we continue to sort of have, and there are other conditions. So the interesting one is it's sort of diagnosed when something doesn't feel right. The
Mm.
sooner you're able to diagnose it, the better, because then the right accommodations can be made early on. um, but at the same time, I think sometimes you also tend to sort of push it up behind a carpet, because there are friends of mine who say, "Oh, I'm having these crying bouts, and are you doing anything about it? Have you gone to the doctor?" No, I haven't. So, like you said, the invisibility of the illness makes it very hard to even sort of go to the point of seeing a doctor and diagnosing it.
Yeah. And Vijay, I would like to come to you. Thank you so much, Asha, for that. You remember that conversation we were having the other day about many Indias. This thing about pushing it under the carpet. Where does this come from? You're on mute.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, to continue with what Asha said, yes, there is a strong genetic link in many severe mental health conditions. And also, in response to the query that you had sort of come up with initially, that in between neurodivergence and mental disorders, I mean, the kind of onset, when it is identified, what are the differences, right? Typically, neurodivergence is what you're born with. Yeah, that's
Mm.
typically as we know it. Maybe it's spotted a bit later because even their awareness is not that high. There are a
Yes.
lot of people who are misdiagnosed. We know of that, right? Now, the difference
Misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all.
at all.
Yeah,
So, yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Whereas what happens typically in mental disorders, whether they are severe mental disorders or moderate or of lesser intensity, typically the onset would begin around adolescence, yeah, to up to age 25. Of course, it can happen much earlier. There is no set norm to this. But globally, there is a gap of 10 years in between onset and diagnosis of a condition of, say, bipolar disorder, right? Yeah. So, although the onset might be at, say, age 21 or 22, typically diagnosis would come in at 32 or so. And that is when the disorder progresses a lot and that causes more damage. Yeah.
Mm.
And of course, your question about the many Indias. Uh, so yes, uh, access to mental health care, awareness, is it really spread as evenly as in urban area? We are in these conversations. Is that accessible equally to people in, say, Kashmir or Assam or in the hinterlands of the country, right? Yeah, the language barriers. Most of the dissemination happens in English, even to this day. Yeah. So when we talk about mental health awareness, conversations, psychoeducation, uh, to how many people is it actually reaching? Yeah. So maybe people in urban area, we are sort of more privileged, not only where it comes to awareness, knowing about what we are dealing with, but also knowing where we can seek help, and having access to mental health care. I think that's a major differentiator
And
as
then,
compared to,
yeah,
you know,
yeah. And also
uh,
not be judged. And, because, uh, so for example, if I hear what you said, that, sometimes the diagnosis happens later. Asha said at the age of 36, for her father at 40. And I know of a few people who've been in their mid 30s when they've been diagnosed. Um, However, the fact is that, uh, you know, 90% of people who are born with disabilities, 90% of people who have disabilities are not born with it. 90% of them acquire. Now, I'm assuming that even mental disabilities would be a part of this. Some of the invisible disabilities would be a part of these 90%, where when a child is born, it is not visible. As a child grows, the behaviors, the social symptoms,
yeah,
how withdrawn, socially withdrawn, academically, how a person is doing, how a person is behaving in office, all of these would lead to possibly a diagnosis.
very much
Now,
so.
uh, the point here is that despite that, today we have only 18 people viewing this podcast. But none of us can ignore the fact that it can hit any one of us anytime, any one of our family members at any time, and lack of awareness cannot be an excuse for not being able to give reasonable accommodation.
Com- Completely
So,
agree with you.
so I am just a little flummoxed that, with people between us. I recently had a conversation with a client, and they said that out of 10,000 employees that they have in the organization, they have only 5 or 6 people who are people with disabilities. And I'm like, dude, globally, they say there's 16% people with disabilities. India did not do the census, but at
Yeah,
least way back in 2011, it said 4%. How is it
mm,
possible that you don't have persons with disability?
mm, very
More
true.
recently, there was somebody who had an episode, Asha, at office, and that person was asked to leave, uh, without a diagnosis, because there was an episode. And you know that in an episode there can be mood swings, there can be conflict, there can be behavior which can be seen as, um, I don't know, not so, maybe ugly or not so professional. So lack of awareness cannot be a reason for this. So what can an organization do? So I here bring Asha back, and then we'll come to you, Ajay. Vijay,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things Vijay and I have discussed this as well. We the expectation with corporates is the employees have to meet the corporates halfway.
Yeah.
And therefore there are concerns around disclosure. There's data privacy that tells you that you don't necessarily need to disclose if you do have illness, which is all valid. But at the same time, if there is an illness that will impact your work episodically even, then there is need to disclose that. In our organization, we always say it's okay to say you're not okay without going beyond and describing what the problem statement is. Having said that, bad behavior can impact other employees and their mental health as well, right? So we talk a lot about toxic workplaces and how that impacts younger staff and things like that. So I guess to your point around a person sort of having an episode and being asked to leave, um, it's going to sort of have to be seen in context of whether this person knew whether he or she had the mental illness. Has she or have they done enough to sort of make sure that they are medicated, they're being cognizant of their illness, and they're conducting themselves in a manner that is responsible. And this applies to your caregivers as well, right? So you
Mhm.
need to be able to be responsible enough to go and take your meds, see the doctor, and so on. If you've done that and then you have this illness, then at that point in time, when the diagnosis happens, the episode happens, it's very difficult for people to gauge at that point in time that the episode is happening. So then it's important to be able to at least share with your line manager or your immediate colleagues that you trust that, look, if something like this happens, please remove me from the situation. And that could potentially be calling the caregiver and having them sort of taken home and then taken care of. I mean, I had an episode at work, and at the time, I didn't even know I had the illness, but we knew something was wrong, right? That I was not well. And then my husband communicated with my line manager, and they got me a virtual role. So there
Mm.
is an empathetic way to deal with the situation, but it's incumbent on the employee as well to come in and say, hey, I have this problem and I need the medication and I need to be hospitalized. Now, I can
Yeah.
also tell you that when I had the psychosis, I was not willing to be hospitalized. But then it was also then up to my caregivers to make sure that I didn't do anything irresponsible. They took my phone away from me because I was messaging people incessantly, putting things on LinkedIn, which didn't make a lot of sense. And I was very embarrassed about it because I didn't know about psychosis even because my father did not have psychosis. So you can also be quite ignorant.
Yeah.
But it's important for the caregivers and the employees as in the line managers to know something is off and then remove that person from the situation, allow that person to get better, and then ease that person back into the workplace.
Makes a lot of sense. I think my meeting, it would be such a wonderful situation, no, if both the parties could meet halfway. Um, but unfortunately, it's just utopian, to even imagine, because employees keep thinking, if I tell, will I get the job? Will I even be heard? Will I be will I be retained? Um, Reasonable accommodation, people don't even understand the concept today. Many organizations even today say, Arey, when we are looking at diversity, we are still looking at women. When we are looking at people with disabilities, we are starting with locomotor. You know what I'm trying to say? So that halfway meeting becomes sometimes very difficult for the employees. And coming back to the managers, and here, Vijay, I would like to hear from you also. Because, see, managers are in a very tight space. Like you said, on one side, they do have the pressure of performance. And if there is a team member who goes on leave for a week or anything, I mean, it can become a problem. But at the same time, um, again, I will come back to the same point that 90% of people with disabilities were not born with it, and any one of us can join the community at any time. So, how do we create this awareness in managers? Because while they are not the ones who will give therapy and medication, they are the ones who are working with the person and they are looking at the nuances. So, over to you, Vijay.
So coming from your broader point, beginning from there, that is what today's interaction is also indicating the lack of participation. Yeah, coming from there. Yeah. So when the earlier question that you had addressed was the RPDA. So does RPDA only apply to the government and the PSUs? Absolutely no. It also applies to all private organizations, right? Yeah,
Hmm.
all corporates or startups or MSMEs, I mean, whatever the structure, need to be compliant with the RPDA. So, isn't it also imperative for more people to be more aware about what mental health conditions look like? What are the challenges people face? What are the barriers? What are the reasonable accommodations that can be offered to support these people? Because that is not actually optional. Yeah, these are mandated under the EOPs or the equal opportunity policies that every organization needs to frame and put up on their portals. Yeah, right. And even register it with the Commissioner for Disabilities. Yeah. So this is not something any corporate entity or, as I said, any private sector entity does as an optional sort of support system that is offered to persons with disabilities, but it is mandated,
Hmm.
and they have to comply with it.
Hmm.
So with that, when we come from that space,
Hmm.
I think the need to be more aware about what they are facing, what they are dealing with. I think it's a sort of a clear-cut sort of a situation, right? The more you know about what you are dealing with, it's easier to, sort of demystify the stereotypes that come around with severe mental health
Yeah.
conditions, the myths that prevail, and those are often the barriers to inclusion, Sonia, right? Whether you're a manager or HR or TA, wherever you're coming from, it's all the damaging stereotypes perpetuated by media, right? So these kind of conversations sort of help demystify what mental health looks like, even when we are talking about severe mental health conditions.
Hmm.
And that is why all the more the need for people to engage in these sort of conversations. Now, also another aspect that you also brought up as an insight, that many organizations talk about numbers which seem almost fictional, the 4 out of 1 lakh or whatever, I mean, which is absolutely not realistic, because of possibly non-disclosure, or they are not vigilant about, even trying to find out who needs accommodations at their workplace. So, even Asha shared the data about, even any workforce that we talk about, there will be a sizable percentage of people living with mental health conditions. Some might not be very severe conditions, but all the same, the number would be sizable. Yeah. So it's also not only about recruiting people, but what about the people who are already part of the organization, right? How can they be supported? So
Hmm.
this kind of sensitization is very crucial. Also, when we go to how mental disorders really pan out, an individual's life, right? Ultimately, it's about individuals, right? It's not, because how it presents across people, it's very different. Yeah, but even if it's the same diagnosis. I myself, lived with bipolar disorder for 26 years without any diagnosis, from age
Right.
14 to 40. So, being more aware about what are the red flags. So, how can a person be supported? Like Asha shared about how the organization supported her during her psychotic episode at the workplace. I think even the humane angle, if we bring in, I think these are very important aspects. When we
Yes.
go, even keep aside what the RPDA talks about as a mandatory kind of obligation on behalf of the corporate world. I think knowing this, knowing what are the challenges a person could face, helps people support the person better in such situations, prevent flare-ups or leading to extreme sort of situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just to recap what we've discussed so far, we've spoken about defining mental disabilities, Vijay and Asha, differentiating it from neurodiversity. We spoke about what do reasonable accommodations look like. We spoke about why people hesitate from disclosing, the culture of disclosure. Why is it not there? We spoke about that. And we also spoke about, maybe the awareness that, or lack of awareness around that this problem is not for me. That feeling that I have today कि it's मेरी problem नहीं है. It's मेरे को फर्क नहीं पड़ता, but that is a myth that we need to bust, because there are people around us who might today be suffering or dealing with it silently without support. It could be that I might get diagnosed a few years from now, or somebody in my friend circle, my family might get diagnosed. So it's not that it is not for me. It is important for me to understand. I think this is one key insight I would want everyone over here who's listening to this to please take away, that let's not negate this as कि किसी और की problem है. It's not like that. So that's one. So now let's come to a more systemic point of view. If an organization were to look at medical disabilities, and to me it would really look like I don't have to make any infrastructure change, I don't have to make ramps, I don't have to, so for me it is about the right mindset, the right ecosystem, the culture. What is it that an organization can do? And Asha, here I would like you to, and think, I know that your organization is already doing a great job, but kahin se to journey shuru hua hoga na. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so like I said, mental illness is not directly addressed, right? We need to start there. I think mental health, mental well-being, stress, burnout, workplaces that have flexibility, all of that is being discussed. But, acute mental illness or severe mental illness, how to cope with that is definitely not a conversation topic today. And to your point on why are people not interested about it, because there's, I think, a severe lack of awareness, and I don't think people also understand how much commonplace this is, right? So 1 in 7 people,
Yeah.
I read somewhere in 2020 that 7 million people in India live with bipolar disorder alone. So that's quite a few, right, of people who have mental illnesses. So it needs to start with awareness conversation saying, hey, I mean, forget about recruitment practices. Look around you. This might be happening in your organization. How do you deal with it as line managers, as HR, from a policy point of view? What are the emergency response that you need to have in place if an episode does happen, such that the employee and the other people around that employee are protected, etc. Currently, I think we just haven't seen enough cases of it. So conversation. And I go back to my earlier point on global capability centers because, those are the best places to start this best practice, right? They are the ones who've already been propagating DEI and employee resource groups and all of that good stuff.
Mhm.
LGBTQ communities, apart from women, there are networks to enable people with special needs and all of that. So they would be willing and open to have these conversations.
Mm.
And there are quite a few of them in the country because we are leading the market in
Yes.
that, right? So, if we were to start this conversation with the global capability centers and then move it to the ITIDS centers and then the Indian organizations and then family run businesses. And Vijay has a bunch of people he's also placing in various organizations. And the first people who would be open to hire such people would also be global capability centers. So I guess why I sort of keep re-emphasizing it is those are the organizations that are probably safer, would offer psychologically safe spaces for employees, and who could potentially have long-term sustained careers in these organizations. Having said that, one of the things that we always talk about for people with severe disability, severe illnesses, it's true for even healthy individuals, is sleep. 8 hours of sleep is absolutely crucial. One of the things I've noticed personally, as well as my psychosis, happens when I go a few days without sleep, and therefore my medication helps me. So,
Hmm.
therefore, the other thing to think about with global capability centers is, are your people who have illnesses, are they on regular shifts and not on, say, a UK shift or a US shift? So that they can sort of have that full 8 hours, and it does not exacerbate their mental illness. So awareness, having those
Wow.
conversations, not just doing these podcasts, but also taking it to these uh, companies, and each company has about 4,000 people, right? And having those conversations company by company, taking them to Confederation of Indian Industries or NASSCOM that leads with GCCs, to sort of bring awareness as an industry body. Those are the things that we can potentially do to start with. Well, this exists. It's possible it exists in our organization. Now what? What do we do?
Mind blowing. And your point about sleep was an absolute, like the nail in the coffin, because I find that it's not just about the shifts, but even otherwise in today's corporate world, the way people work, constantly hooked onto a device. 8 hours sleep has, I don't know if it is even a thing anymore. Right. Vijay, let me come to you. And like Asha said, that you do place a lot of these people. And I know that when we place, we have our piece, share of challenges. Um, any examples or success stories where you've been able to have, you've been able to place people with mental disabilities, severe mental disabilities? How did the conversation go? Or if not, what are the challenges that you face when you are speaking with to the client side for hiring or placing them? You're on mute.
Great question, Sonica. So, firstly, to put it in the right context, we are at the beginning of the journey of placements. So, a lot of conversations have happened with corporates, and there are a lot of openings which are available to our candidates. But one of the concern that we find, look, now let's discuss these barriers, which
Yes.
are maybe sort of typical to our set of candidates. Okay. Now, geography. Is a person, able to relocate? Because, let's emphasize this. The comfort of a family structure the caregiving that comes through family is difficult to replicate when you are working alone. The person from Bengaluru may be shifted to Gurgaon. Is that really a feasible, possibility for that person? How long is that person going to sustain that? So I'm not saying every single person might reject a job offer when it is in a distant city, but a lot of the candidates might find this as a barrier. So
Uh,
that's one
to
thing which
your
is happening.
to your
Sorry.
point, Vijay, shifting of houses,
Yeah.
shifting of cities is
Yeah.
considered a major life event and a stressor. So, with
Yes.
somebody already dealing with a mental health condition,
Yes.
it is
Yes.
an added stressor. So, you're
Absolutely.
absolutely bang on. Please continue. Sorry.
So, for instance, just to cite one instance, we had a fantastic offer for a finance head in Pune. And we had a candidate exactly matching the, sort of JD. And the prospective recruiter was so excited when she looked at the JD that we'll sort of give him even a better offer if he's willing to relocate. But that guy stayed put. I'm not going to take the chance of upsetting the apple cart. So this is a practical issue. So we have got maybe more than 100 to 150 kind of job offers for our candidates. But these kind of issues prevent actual translation to placements. So a handful of placements have happened. Uh, but also there's another aspect. Uh,
Can I
this is
can
also
I
very
just
interesting. Yeah,
can
please,
I
of course,
just
please,
yeah
please, please,
just addition to
please,
this,
please.
same situation, candidate willing to relocate, but
Yeah,
the hiring manager refusing, saying what if something happens when the candidate
yes, yes,
relocates to the new location.
yes,
Now,
yes,
here, and Asha, I'll pull you in here because when you say that, the candidate and the organization need to meet midway. Now, here, I don't know where the midway is because on one side, Vijay is saying that organization is willing to make an offer, but the candidate is not able to move because he or she or they have their own challenges. Here, I'm talking about a candidate who's willing to move, but the organization is saying, हमें डर लगता है. So, how do they come to the middle ground? And that's something I'll park with you, Asha, and I'll come to you once we've heard Vijay's answer.
yeah. Now, these are practical challenges. The second challenge,
Yeah.
just today, a candidate communicated with me that, uh, the feedback that I got is I'm overqualified for this job. Now, due to this, gaps in CVs, the kind of challenges a person faces, a person is willing to downgrade to a lower sort of hierarchy just to be in employment. Okay,
Yes.
let's also face this truth. So this
Yes.
is also, coming back to where what Asha talked about meeting halfway, right? I mean, if I know this is my functionality level, although my technical capability might be up there, but I know personally where I have some limitations due to my mental health struggles, and I'm not going to stretch myself, to that extent. Yeah.
Mm,
And the feedback from the recruiter is this person is too qualified. Sorry, we can't hire the person.
right.
Now, now what I sense is the reason could be the recruiting organization could be doubting whether the person would stay in the job if he gets a better offer. Typically, I think that would where the mindset would come from. That's the only barrier I can see. Okay, otherwise, what's the barrier? Especially
I
when you're dealing with a person with disability, which should also be factored in. We are not talking about general sets of CVs that a recruiter is sort of comparing. Am I
right.
right? Yeah, yeah,
So yes, we've also seen this. So something that we've seen is that a there is a mismatch
yeah,
between what is the job specification and what the client candidate is bringing on the table,
yeah,
and the doubt which is there on the company side, will this person stay? um, uh, the compensation, sometimes the compensation is not, the compensation gap is there. The seniority gap is there. So there are lots of these doubts, but again, would a conversation, a candid conversation here, because I want a job, you want somebody who will stay. There is a fitment. But we are not talking to each other and making assumptions.
yeah.
And yeah, and what do you say to that, Asha? I mean, does that happen?
See, I also work a lot with women, Sonica, and we also have we run a community of women, which is 1,000 members strong, and I've led ERGs, and we have very similar issues there as well, right? So, your broad spectrum of issues is similar, but when it comes to individual context and problem, it's different, and therefore nothing beats a conversation individual to individual. It has to be, and therefore, it's a very difficult one for persons with severe mental illnesses because they fear that if they do come out as being diagnosed, then they fear judgment and all of that, stigma and all of that. Having said that, if reasonable accommodations are to be made, and for the employee's context to be well understood, then that conversation has to happen, and also the ask for reasonable accommodation has to be reasonable, right? So what the policy would allow, like I mentioned earlier, flexible working, part-time working, sabbaticals, leaves, medical leave, what have you, right? I mean, there's a series of things that can be put in place to help the employee go through an episode, come back, also help the employee through it as well, even if they were to be healthy. Now, to your specific example, like we said, if the corporates are not willing to meet this employee halfway, then the employee needs to walk away. There is no other solution. But ultimately, awareness, ultimately, those individualized conversations, and we always, even in the women's spectrum, we say, seek out a mentor,
Mm.
seek out somebody who is a trusted person who can then help you with the right solution, who knows the environment. So, two, three things that we say is buddying up with the right person. So, a buddy system where if a person with severe mental illness were to be buddied up with someone else with severe mental illness, that's quite a powerful thing, because then you feel like, oh, you're in a place where you're seen and heard. And I had somebody who had bipolar disorder in the UK who was my peer. Similarly, having a mentor, and I had a mentor who's a very senior leader who was a head of DNI, who'd come out and as having bipolar herself. I mean, as being diagnosed bipolar herself. So it was great to see somebody senior. So having that, and then
Yeah.
of course having the right sponsors with whom you have those conversations. And when I need accommodations, I have to pick up the phone and talk. Nobody else is going to advocate for me apart from me.
Super. Yeah. Yes, Vijay, you had raised your hand in between. You wanted to say something.
Uh, yeah. So, also we need to bring across this important point, apart from what the acts mandate and, going beyond that. Imagine if a person of Asha's talent wasn't accommodated at her, organization, what a talent they would have missed out on. Let's look at it from the potential which is being completely ignored.
Bazooka.
There is amazing talent. Now,
Hmm.
to bring another, perspective to this is a majority of our candidates are postgrads.
Hmm.
So again, that stereotype that, okay, we are looking at very low profile kind of candidates. No, that's not the scenario. There are
Absolutely.
people with a lot of intelligence, capability, super creative, innovative, resourceful. We have seen people with amazing resourcefulness. So they bring a separate set of, skills to an organization, which, may be a neurotypical, I mean, to use a
I
cliche,
agree.
might not bring to the organization. So that is where, the power of diversity, bringing in diversity to an organization. Look at it from what it has to offer also, rather than just looking at it from a humane perspective, yeah, which might
So
not appeal
bipolar
to the
disorder, to
corporates.
Vijay's point,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
mania sort of fuels productivity at a sort of very high levels, which are which an ordinary person cannot sustain. So that's one of the reasons why people with bipolar disorder tend to do exceptionally well. I mean, Vijay being case in point, and his group. So you're absolutely right, and they say that about ADHD as well, right? I mean,
Yes.
you can have these phases of hyperproductivity.
Bursts. Bursts
Yes.
of hyper productivity, and
Yes.
you capitalize on those. Yes. And a lot of see what Vijay said, that many of them are postgraduates, PhDs,
yeah,
masters.
yeah,
Fact that many of these happened later in life. So they were unlike a disability, when disabilities happen early on, and the societal conditioning prevents a child from participating in education or in social development, etc. But in this case, many times that phase is already past. So when you are discovering at at the age of 30, 35, 36, you're already, highly qualified. You also have work experience. Now, this is talent which is waiting to be tapped,
Indeed.
right? And sure, we make reasonable accommodations, but reasonable accommodations are exactly that, reasonable accommodations, right? Flexi working timing, work from home, virtual role, uh, the freedom to ask for switching of meetings, and so on and so forth. But the point here is that, along with, for example, mental health, there are so many others. For example, multiple sclerosis. Same, it happens later in life, and they are so educated. They have work experience, but again get missed out by a lot of organizations. So I think it all boils down to A, awareness, B, possibly getting out of comfort zone, the fear that will we be able to do it. Do you think that also, somewhere, because it's been so long that we've been talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. In fact, we just published yesterday the Marching Sheep PWD Inclusion Index. Despite all the talk, the BRSR and everything, I think in the last 2 years there has been a pressing of the pedal as far as PWD inclusion is concerned. It's less than 1% employment for people with disabilities, and PSUs are leading the way, not private sector. Right now, we still can do so much, and if you have that talent, then why not grab it with both arms, and maybe work out more innovative private sector at 0.21%. Okay, that's what Alok is telling me. And I'm saying maybe have more innovative employment contracts, part-time contracts, 4-hour contracts, uh, 2 to 3 day in a week kind of contracts, have outcome-based contracts. So I believe that opportunities and are vast provided we open our eyes. I don't know what you Asha and Vijay, you think, but
I
the
have one
struggle.
point to make on
Yeah.
outcome-based contracts, right? Because that is akin to a consulting world where you are moving from project to project and you're trying to deliver for each of these projects, and that can be quite sort of exhausting. So
Uh,
even for an ordinary person, a lot of people that I know want to shift from consulting or audit to industry. And they say industry because industry is a lot more, you have a goal for the full year, and you have the full year to sort of meet out your goal that accommodates the highs and the lows, and sort of the times of productivity and the times when you're not so productive, etc., and you're not sort of judged and performance
on
managed
that.
on your last project. So
Yeah.
therefore, highly recommend people with such diagnosis to look at other organizations that are not consulting, because that can quite that can burn out even normal people. So it would be quite disastrous for somebody with mental illness.
So more sustained.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super. All right. So so what would be quick 5 giveaways if I were to ask Vijay you to start with? If you were to tell an organization starting out, okay, let's get started with inclusion of people with mental disabilities. You're on mute.
First, yeah.
Okay.
Firstly, let's talk about the numbers. Yeah, the National Mental Health Survey 2016, the largest such survey in India, had pegged the number at a staggering 150 million people living with mental health conditions needing intervention, mind you. Yeah, okay. Lancet, the noted authority in this area, has then upped the number during the pandemic to 200 million. So can you grasp what numbers we are talking about? 200 million people living with mental health conditions which need who need intervention. Yeah. So these are not passing kind of anxiety or stress or burnout kind of issues, but serious conditions. Yeah,
Correct.
essentially to talk about. Yeah. Okay. So you look at it as a percentile of the population, and that would come to around more than 15% of the population. Who would be among this chunk, who would be in the productive employable age, at least one third of this chunk, because some might be adolescents, some might be in the retirement age. But even if you hone it down to one third of this, it would be still be 5% of the entire population we are talking about. And you said the entire disability inclusion is 1%. That includes all disabilities, not mental health led,
Yes.
again led by the government. So where is the private sector in this at all? Yeah, right. Of course, we cannot ignore that a lot of people with mental health conditions who are already in the workforce have not disclosed their conditions. So that could be one factor that could explain it away. Yeah, that's point number one. So this is something we cannot wish away. Yeah, it is there staring in front of us, and also bringing it back to what you had talked about, Sonika. Either we are directly affected within our families, or somebody in our relatives is living with a mental health condition. Let's face that. So it's not about them; it's about us now. Let's also bring it close to us. Yeah, it's something we can't just overlook. Second thing, let's also address what prevents inclusion of persons with mental illnesses. Is it the doubts that people have, the lack of awareness, lack of sensitization, the damaging stereotypes that prevail? Are people willing to hold conversations? We can help them to sort of demystify and also help them understand what this community has to offer. Okay, that's the second point. Yeah. The accommodations, third point, the accommodations that people with mental health conditions need, this segment of disabilities need, are much lesser than people with physical disability. I think that's the moot point. What is the organization supposed to do to make this set of people comfortable at the workplace? Yeah, make them, ensure that they can work at their optimal capacity. Yeah, be at their best without burning out. There is not much of a ask. You have already outlined that. Yeah. But this is a factor which is often overlooked by, again, the stereotypes. Yeah. My God. I mean, what are we facing? Right. Right.
Mm.
This is schizophrenia. What are we dealing with? Whereas when it translates into fact, it is not something so daunting. Yeah. Fourth, uh, this is mandated by law, but I don't think that it should be limited to what the law tells you, because then it wouldn't be spirit driven. I think this should be looked at as a non-discriminatory approach to providing everybody a chance to livelihoods, right? Right to livelihood is a fundamental right of every human being. A right to dignity also is enshrined in the Constitution, right? Let's look at these broader perspectives. And if a recruiter, an organization comes on one page with us on these key aspects, I think many small elements can fall into place very easily. I think these are the much broader macro perspectives that I would like to share. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if people, candidates have an advocate like you rooting for them with the client, then I'm sure they will get placed. So,
Yeah. Thank you so much.
uh, Asha, over to you. Your five call to action.
I think it's just one for me, which is institute employee resource groups for persons with mental illness in organizations. Start with global capability centers. The moment you have an employee resource group with a set of volunteers who are passionate about the cause, everything else will fall in place, from awareness to programs to how interventions need to happen and so
Sorry,
on.
Asha, may I just request you to hold? Raki, I think uh,
Yeah, yeah,
Renuka's
I'm switching.
not. Yeah, sorry to interrupt, Asha. Back to you.
No worries. I was just saying that the only action is an employee resource group. If we can, and I think I'm going.
You've gone on mute.
I think I'm going to take it back to my organization first because now it just struck me that we should have an employee resource group for persons with severe mental illnesses. Start there, and then everything else falls in place. An employee resource group then runs a calendar of events from awareness to sessions to peer circles and all of that. Because I just came out of a call with a very dear friend of mine saying she couldn't stop crying.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, what if we had an ERG, right? Because there are people who are not diagnosed in our organization as well.
Super. And the good thing with your organization is that at least they have role models. You are there, at least that psychological safety to say that somebody who is at the CXO level has come out, is being taken care of, has been given reasonable accommodation, has a flourishing career. I think that in itself will speak a lot, isn't it?
Yes, it should, but ultimately, I think one person will not suffice, right? And I'm sure there are other organizations with people with mental illnesses as well. At least, what the celebrities have done is they've made depression a cool illness, which is not a bad thing because a lot more people are coming out, with
Yes.
depression. There are uglier illnesses like ours and schizophrenia, etc., where, we need to sort of be able to come out with more role models. But think
Mm.
about the Pride group, right? LGBTQ community in India. What they do is they have a bunch of allies. There are a lot of
Yes.
people who are still not come out, but they have these allies they can, sort of be confidence with. And we do have a very senior leader who's come out. And we have another senior leader whose son has come out. But even then, there are a lot of employees who will not come out, but at least they know they have that safety net in that ERG.
Yes. Yes.
And similarly, I think we should do that with persons with mental illnesses.
Yeah. Super. So great. I think this was a great conversation, but I still feel we have just scratched the surface. Um, uh, I really wish we had more audience, but I'm sure the team will make sure it reaches as many people as possible. And Vijay, let's just keep pushing. Let's be woodpeckers. People like us don't stop with one no. We will keep on pushing, pushing, pushing till we until we make some headway, and we have Asha to tell us what to do. Next time we get stuck, we pick up the phone and we say, Asha, अभी ये हो गया, अभी बताओ क्या करना है.
Happy to, and
So
I really liked Atia in this conversation, and it is great that you brought this in. I think the last I've seen this is in Doordarshan in the news, and you're right, the government does more for inclusion than the corporate sector does, because I haven't seen this in any of the recent news channels. So fabulous to see this.
awesome. So thank you, both of you. Awesome conversation, in depth, very raw. I know, very raw, very real. There was. I don't think we sugar coated anything at all. So thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your insights, uh, in letter and spirit.
Structure and heart, yes. Thank you very much, and thanks for having us.
Yes,
Vijay,
and I
you're on
look.
mute.
Uh, Before we sign off,
Thank you
sorry,
for
sorry,
being a
sorry.
great moderator, also,
Yes.
bringing in such great insights, Sonica, in this fantastic platform. Yeah,
Thank you.
really appreciate that. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for having us.